And away we go. It is the Nightcap, brought to you by Hail Mary Sports Bar right here on BearcatJournal.com. Again, Westfest is back. After a 10-year break, Westfest is back, kicking off Friday, June 20th, and rocking all weekend long. Guess what? Hail Mary's is right in the heart of the action. The main outdoor Westfest stage up right in front of Hail Mary's, and they've teamed up with Triple J's Barbecue to bring you a mouth-watering restaurant experience all weekend. Get ready for some amazing barbecue. Remember, it's 21 plus to enter the bar, and you'll need a physical valid ID to get into Westfest. Cool off with our $5 domestic 22-ounce drafts. Ice-cold beer, ice-cold air conditioning are waiting for you at Hail Mary's. All right, let's get this show on the road. You know what we haven't talked about in a long time, Aaron?
I don't. Do tell.
Men's basketball. Things have been pretty quiet. The roster is full, stacked, loaded, ready to go. They are now starting to arrive mostly on campus. I think the only one left that is not here yet is Mustafa Cham. He's supposed to be here by Wednesday. So everybody will be in. I believe they had their first workout tonight. So probably look for some of that content on social media over the next 24 hours or so. But I think it's a good time to get back into a little basketball conversation, Aaron. Especially with this from Rick Jr., who is on Twitter, I guess works for the Big 12 Conference, or does something for the Big 12 Conference. He tweeted out today, he just heard on the Big 12 radio on TuneIn that the 25-26 basketball opponent matrix pairings will be released on Thursday's show on Big 12 radio on TuneIn. The format, 18 conference games, 3 opponents played twice, 12 opponents played once. Also added, Commissioner Yormark has said the Big 12 will schedule based on TV value, rivalries, geography, and fairness, whatever fairness means. However, 3 rivalry home and home type is what I take from that, Aaron.
I agree.
Who do you think best fits those descriptions when it comes to picking the 3 opponents for Cincinnati? TV value, rivalries, geography, and fairness.
Well, the low-hanging fruit is West Virginia. That one's the easy one. I can't imagine them not doing a home and home with Cincinnati and West Virginia. As far as geography goes, it's certainly the closest for either of those two teams, as they're kind of out in the corner away from literally everybody else. So I would imagine that's probably done deal. I think you could easily make a ton of money if you could bet on which one of these teams ended up as one of the 3 opponents. That one,
I think all 3 are probably pretty. I think all 3 are probably pretty. I'll be surprised if I don't know if it's not the easiest 3 to think of.
So I'm going with that one first. Second, I'd probably say UCF. For again, geography reasons, with us kind of being on the East Coast, you don't have to worry about different time zones and things like that. You came in together. The Twitter verse of the hotel managers versus grimy Clifton. They hate each other, and it's fine. We're good with it.
It's hotel managers versus
last night.
Hotel managers versus bed bugs, right? That's pretty much what it is.
That's good. I like that. I think we'd all be okay with being referred to as the bed bugs. That's fine.
Yeah.
For plenty of reasons. That
Right.
said, I think UCF would. Plus, you have the Cham and Njai thing with them coming here. I think that's only going to add, not fuel, but Molotov cocktails, maybe not the best time of making that reference, but I think that it's probably going to add plenty of that to this rivalry, and I think that it'll be good. I think people will tune in for that. Third, I'd hope it's Houston. I guess.
Yeah, those
Not
would
that
be. I mean,
that necessarily would be good for the win. Not that I think it would be good for wins and losses, because right now Houston's had Cincinnati's number for as far back as I can remember. But I would imagine if you're going to pick three, those would be the three you go with for the history of what Cincinnati and Houston has been. Not for what the rivalry has been, not necessarily for what the win-loss totals have been, especially of late.
Well, I mean, Cincinnati dominated the rivalry all the way up until 6 years ago, and then the tables turned, and Houston has had control ever since then. But I think those are the easy. I think that's the low-hanging fruit. I would be surprised. Maybe one of those is different. I would feel like if I could bet that two of those three are the home and homes, I would bet on it. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's all three. Like, it just doesn't make, given those criteria that Yormark put out there, it doesn't make any sense for it to be anybody else.
Baylor would be a little interesting for the Dan Skillings factor.
And Celestine.
Yeah.
There was a trade.
Yeah. So I think that would be interesting, especially given that dynamic. Outside of that, though, I don't think that Kirk Risa going back to Arizona offers anything that would bring more eyes to the table, I guess.
Well, here's the tough part. When you're talking about the top teams, they're going to have other rivalries that make more sense
because of the history of the Big 12. Right.
Yeah. Like Kansas is going to have Kansas State and probably Baylor, Arizona. Arizona is going to have, I mean, I think you have to do Arizona State, right?
Probably.
You know, Baylor's going to have all the Texas schools in Kansas. Like, it just, Cincinnati wouldn't be up at this point on
Utah,
the pecking
BYU
order of anyone but Houston. Like, that's the only one of those teams at the top of the conference that Cincinnati has like a rivalry, quote unquote, tie to. So that would be one at the top of the conference. I think if you're going to be fair, you want to try to get everybody one of those upper quadrant, like, teams.
You also don't want to just take Houston and match them up against every top team in the league, because that's ridiculous.
That's not fairness.
Right.
Although they did it last year and Houston went 19-1. So the hell do I know?
Well, they had the gauntlet of 20. What the fuck were they thinking?
I mean, hold on. Just humor me here.
Houston
home away was Baylor, Kansas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia. So I guess they had Oklahoma State and West Virginia, but Baylor, Kansas, Texas Tech that's not a fun 6 games on your conference slate. They still went fucking 19-1.
They were really good.
Let's talk roster a little bit, Aaron, as these guys are all getting to town and getting acclimated. I think the more it has settled into my brain, it's by far the most complete, well-constructed roster. Does that mean it doesn't have flaws? No. Like, there are still flaws that depending on who's on the floor, this team's going to have some flaws. But in terms of having kind of an answer at each position with different types and styles of play, this is the most well-constructed roster I think Wes has had. I think there's a lot of options, a lot of versatility. There's a ton of length. think Mustafa Cham's wingspan is like 7'5", 7'6",
Yeah, I
and
think so.
Baba Miller's is 7. I think it's on Draft Express from one of the NBA things a while back, like 7'4.5" wingspan. So you have two guys with 7'4" plus wingspans. One of them's 7'2". One of them's listed at 6'11". I think he's probably 7 foot. You've got a physical big in Big Slime. You've got a shooter and Jalen Celestine. It just, in terms of being able to dance all the dances, this team seems to have more of those pieces. And more importantly, Aaron, there seems to be, at least on paper, some toughness returning to the program that I think was lacking desperately a season ago.
We talked towards the end of last season that it seemed like, don't want to say that Wes has an infatuation with shiny new toys or anything like that, but it seemed like he was more about, in constructing last season's roster, it was more about getting the best guys you could get and what they could do together be damned. It was about getting the best pieces, and I think he did a good job
about the portal.
He did a good job about getting good pieces, but it was square peg round hole. There was no, and we didn't know that early on, but we saw that evolve after the conference play started, where the wheels kind of fell off, and it was very confusing as to what their identity was. It didn't help that your stars went out.
Well,
the guys
I also think
old reliable struggled.
I think one of the things that, and this is not, I don't want this to come off as me, and I've said this before, so it's not new. I don't want this to come off as me saying it's Dylan Mitchell's fault. But when you added Dylan Mitchell was going to play. He was your most consistent guy. If I were to give an MVP to the team last year, it would have been Dylan Mitchell. But when you brought Dylan Mitchell in, Simas Lukosius bumps up to the 3, where I think he was a more natural fit at the 4. Dan Skillings bumps up to the 2, where I think he was a more natural fit at the 3. I think doing those two things in a lot of ways can explain why those two guys never found themselves, never really were able to get it going. And there wasn't a lot of roster versatility. And for most of the season, especially once Connor Hickman went out and then you didn't have CJ Frederick, you didn't have a 2. Dan Skillings wasn't a shooting guard. He's a forward. And you moved him away from the basket. You took it like, it just, the way the roster was constructed was flawed. And that is something that's difficult in the portal era, Aaron, is having the foresight to know, do all these pieces fit? Or did I just buy a bunch of nice pieces to like different puzzles? You know, and I think last year they bought a bunch of nice pieces to different puzzles, and that puzzle never fit. Hopefully, the way this roster is constructed, especially with Corey Evans now as a GM, who has the experience with the Oklahoma City Thunder on what is probably the best constructed roster in the NBA, hopefully some of that was brought to Cincinnati when they were deciding on who to add and why to add and how to add.
What I'll say is I'm sure he had some input, but I'm not going to put this roster for good, for better or worse, on Corey. I don't know that.
Go ahead.
Do you know what I mean? Like I just I don't want to give him credit where credit may not be due for whether this team has success or fails, because I don't feel like the timing was right to give him that.
So here's what I'll say. And I do agree with that, but here's what I'll say. I think what you can hopefully give him is how to build. Maybe not, he didn't have the biggest hand in going out and getting the players this time around, but I would hope he was in those conversations saying, okay, yes, I think this works this way. Yes, I don't think this guy is the guy that we should go after because I don't think he meshes with this and that. Like just his ability to kind of see
fingerprints are on the blueprint, but not quite. Yeah.
No, I mean, I can go through
I'm
specifically and like I know who recruited each guy, like who was the lead on each of the guys that they brought in from the portal. That was more an assistant coach thing.
I guess what I'm saying though is I think he had influence on what this roster is. I think that his fingerprints are going to certainly be on the blueprint, but I don't want to put whatever happens again, for better or for worse, with whatever happens with this team on him. I just that's my stance on it. Anyone else can do what they want.
I'm just saying, I hope when it comes to roster management, he had a voice very much in, I think this will work. I think that'll work. Like when you go back and listen to his conversation with Dave and I on what he envisions like a roster looking like, a well-built roster looking like, I think we saw a lot of that as they were placing these pieces of the puzzle together. There's shooting, there's defense, there's length, there's athleticism, there's skill. Like all of those pieces that he talked about seem to be touched in this roster building process. So
sure,
it's gonna be interesting. Hopefully we'll hear some little birdies chirping about as we go through the next couple weeks. June is usually kind of the ramp up stage where, you know, you're doing a lot of skill development and you're not doing a lot of team stuff in June. Then you break for 4th of July. And then when they come back in July, it's kind of let's crank it up and get, you know, an hour a day, 4 days a week or whatever it is, together as a unit and kind of start working to look like a team, as opposed to the first month where it's, you know, let's hone everybody's skills and let's get our emphasis and whatever we're focusing on this year installed. And then in the back half of July, we'll put it all together. So basketball
There's
season,
certainly plenty of new pieces to get plenty of reporting on because we don't know much about a lot of these dudes.
9 new guys, 9 of them. And there's only 13.
Let's go.
It'll be a long summer. All right, that's the nightcap. By the way, BCJ pod Thursday this week because tomorrow night, Wednesday, is the ribbon cutting ceremony for the IPF. Keegan and I will be there. I'm sure I'll talk about it with Aaron tomorrow night some, and then Keegan and I will talk about it again on Thursday. That's the nightcap, brought to you by Hail Mary Sports Bar, right here on BearcatJournal.com.
See